I really feel like that's something lacking in today's climate. And I just think it'd be cool to encourage people to look at this dope little organization and see where there might be a free little library in your area, and take your kids if you have some. I know everyone is involved with children in some way, shape, or form. You got a little brother, little sister, you have kids of your own, nieces, nephews, whatever it is. If you're in a community center, just look at these little free libraries, stack them with books, and take some books for yourself, and, spread the word. I think, you always hear children of the future, and I think books is definitely a way to, experience something that otherwise you wouldn't be able to, and giving them the chance to have that little piece of accomplishment by finishing an actual book in their hands. This, as I said before in the beginning of the article, a lot of places that are underfunded don't have access to books. And if you start early, the earlier the better. So I hope everybody can go out and spread that word with that. And this last story actually comes from my favorite goodnewsshared.com. Go check it out for yourselves. All right. Now we're going to get into this segment called this week's African American organizations to know. So the first one this week I wanted to brush up on is the Association of Black Psychologists. Now, the Association of Black Psychologists was established to promote and advance the profession of African psychology, influence and affect social change, and develop programs whereby psychologists of African descent can assist in solving problems of Black communities and other ethnic groups. Okay, so the reason I brought this up is because a lot of people who aren't from, African descent or even ethnic descent, a lot of them don't understand what Black people go through, let alone what, in quotes, advice they can give. I'm not going to go look to somebody who's never experienced my life experiences and try to get some advice from them on what I should do, because they, it just doesn't make any sense. Me even being Puerto Rican who's been racially profiled and discriminated against, I still can never understand what people of a darker skin tone color go through. And the last thing anybody of color would want to hear is somebody, like I said, who hasn't experienced what they've been through, give their take on how to navigate the world or how to solve some of their problems, and, how to combat that type of, oh, you shouldn't have been, just it's things like that. You don't want to get advice from people who don't have or haven't been through the same things you have. So I kind of wanted to just highlight that organization because they're dedicated into doing that exact thing for you, for those, that specific group of people. Now, the second African American organization that I wanted to highlight is called Colorcom. Now, Colorcom is an essential organization for women of color in all areas of communication, including public relations, corporate communications, advertising, print media, broadcasts, digital, and more. And the reason I bring this up is because women of color are some of, if not the most marginalized group of people in our society. And if you happen to be in this field of work, I just wanted to be able to provide an organization dedicated into helping people in this area, if you didn't already know. So I hope those organizations that I just shared today are helpful to you or somebody and I kind of, I just encourage you guys to share this with them, and it might help them get to where they want to go, if not at least somewhere to turn to if need be, and if the chance comes that they need somebody to, they just having that information itself is very helpful. All right. Now, for the last topic we're going to touch on is this week's person of the week. Now, this one I picked, as I said before, it's Black History Month, so we are picking somebody who has made a serious impact on today's society and changed the world for the better in our lives and in the lives of others. And this guy goes by the name of Robert Abbot. You may or may not have heard that name, but for those of you who don't, here's a little more background information. So Robert was born 5 years at the end of the Civil War and founded what's known as the Chicago Defender. Now, the Chicago Defender was a newspaper that, it wasn't just your regular old newspaper. It was one of the most important black newspapers in history, and it was established in 1905. Now, just to emphasize the importance of this newspaper, without Robert, there wouldn't be an Essence magazine or Jet or Black Enterprise, no Source magazine, and definitely no Undefeated. And if you don't know what those magazines are, they're all black magazine outlets that kind of highlight black social communities and things like that. So back to the Chicago Defender. So this newspaper made Robert one of the nation's most prominent post-slavery black millionaires. And he basically paved the way for prominent black publishers like Earl G. Graves and John Johnson and Edward Lewis. If you don't know who those guys are, just go look them up. You'll see. Now, Robert was the pioneer of the black press, but this story was so intertwined. So Robert's story basically has to do with slaves. It has to do with Nazis and very little bit of money just to start. So the reason I say that is because Robert was the son of slaves. No surprise there. He was only born 5 years after the Civil War was done. So he grew up he grew up with his stepfather, who was half German, and his stepfather's his family actually eventually joined Hitler's army, the Third Reich, during the 1930s, which is crazy. But fortunately, though, Robert was taught to hate racial injustices instead of, add to them and all that nonsense, especially during that time, which makes him super progressive. And even though he had all the reason to embrace it, like I said, due to all the crap that he went through during his upbringing, let's face it, just because he was born after the Civil War didn't mean that racism wasn't over. He was a big proponent for the Great Migration. If you guys don't know what that is, it's basically when 6 million African Americans moved from the South and went to live in urban cities in the West, Northeast, and Midwest, with over 100,000 moving to Chicago, which basically explains all the Southern roots that people, may or may not have understood why a lot of black people have to do with the South, Well, Robert's success, he kind of just went out his way to welcome millions of black people who abandoned those Jim Crow laws in the South, and they headed to Chicago, where like a ton of manufacturing jobs were awaiting them. And the Chicago Defender started off as a 25-cent 4-pamphlet little newspaper, and it was primarily distributed in black neighborhoods at first, but it grew to 500,000 readers a week. So Robert, being the natural born hustler he was, due to the encouragement for all those blacks to move from the South, his newspaper was basically banned in the South. But because Robert was such a hustler, he used this network of black railroad porters to distribute the newspaper in the South. And after the Great Migration, the Defender made sure to bring the issues, attentions to issues affecting blacks in the early 20th century, like segregation, Jim Crow laws. They even brought attention to the 1919 Chicago riots, for those of you who like history. But Robert was one man that inspired thousands of people to move and seek a better life for themselves and their families. And because of him, we have this amazing hip hop culture. We have all these black enterprises. It's, just that thing that he did. He was one of the first African American millionaires, but that one person made all of that possible. So I just want to say thank you for being such an inspiration and helping shape America for what it is today. And all that makes all the difference. So I wanted to share that with you guys. That was this week's Limelight Highlight, Person of the Week. All right, guys. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the good news. I hope you got some useful information from our Black Organization segment, and I hope you learned something from this week's Person of the Week that you didn't already know. That's all we have for today. The last few things is this week's quote of the week is from Desmond Tutu, the South African Anglican cleric. known for his work as an anti-apartheid and human rights activist. And it goes like this, quote, "My humanity is bound up in yours, for we can only be human together," unquote. I'll leave you guys with that. And if you want to reach me, as always, you can do that at limelight@gmail.com. Same thing for Instagram and Facebook, Limelight Highlight. And for any questions, comments, concerns, maybe you found something interesting, that a story you guys want me to share or that you want to share with me, or something good you partook in, no matter how big or small, please hit me up. And as always, if you enjoy this podcast, leave a comment, review, rating, and be sure to share with your friends. Until next time, I am your host. This has been the Limelight Highlight. Be humble, be helpful, pay it forward, and be the best you. See y'all next week. Peace.